Hello, this is Brian.
And this is Stephanie.
Welcome to the making and the remaking of a codependent mind.
This time we're going to talk about the tool of apologizing in relationships.
Right, so when we talk about the work of relationships, this being of the three, let's remind ourselves what the three are, being knowledge and understanding being one. There's the maintaining or building a connection. And then, of course, the strengthening the partnership. So this one falls into the connection, but a repairing of a connection.
So similar to gratitude, this is more of a specialty tool. We talked about last time how one problem with the tool of gratitude is some people want to treat it like a power tool. They expect it to do too much work in their life when it's more about finesse work. And similarly, apology is not this broad-based tool. It's not like a hammer. Everything's on a nail. It's a tool that you're going to want to pick up in specific situations, the situations in which the connection that you have with your partner needs repair.
And it can be very effective for that. But I know for sure the pull of it wanting to do so much more, or almost feeling like I need it to do so much more a lot throughout my life. I've used it that way anyway.
We want to set aside, though, the use of apology in generic social situations. So recognizing that saying, I'm sorry, is a kind of social lubricant designed to smooth out some interactions that we have with people, including strangers.
And it's pretty harmless when just in those contexts. It can be funny sometimes when people overuse it, but it doesn't really have a whole lot of effect. It just smooths things out.
In fact, there's quite a bit of research as to how effective it is in those situations, including work situations. That is kind of interesting. But again, we're going to focus on romantic relationships, apologizing in romantic relationships, how to use that tool within your romantic relationships and what happens when that goes wrong.
There's various ways that it can go wrong. And one of the things we said in the gratitude episode was how there's gratitude theater, and apologies can be the same sort of thing when it can be used completely and authentically, and then it's having an opposite effect.
We're going to call those faux apologies.
Right.
And there are some people who are excellent at faux apologies who essentially never really apologize. It's always about apology theater for them. And those people are...
You guessed it, narcissists.
That's right. And you spent 12 years cumulatively into a romantic relationship with narcissists, so you have quite a bit of experience with apology theater.
Yes, and like we've talked about when it comes to the behaviors of narcissism, both of those relationships were similar in so many ways, and the ways that apologies were used were almost identical. And there was this kind of arc. So with both of them, it would start at the very beginning of the relationship, there would be apologies. But the apologies were immediately followed by some kind of excuse, like I'm sorry, but sort of thing. So, I'm sorry, but so with R, it's I'm sorry, I know this is a behavior that I've done before. I can't help it. And then it goes into why, when other people are what I see as stupid or not getting something, I have a hard time dealing with that. Basically, something like, you're being stupid, and I have a hard time not being mean to people who are stupid.
Right. So I'm sorry, but you're just so stupid. I can't help
Yeah, you're just so stupid. I can't help myself. Right. And then with Jay, there were several different sources, but in the beginning, it was mostly just when she flew off the handle in an extremely abusive way, and then I would react to it, and in a way that I did a little more in the beginning, which was, wow, that was over the top. Wow, that hurt a lot. That was a really not a very good exchange. However, I said it at the time, in a codependent way. And it was like, oh, yes, I'm sorry. So both of them using the word, I'm sorry. Yes. This is the kind of the way I behave when I'm tired, or when I'm frustrated, or when I'm hungry, or, like all these triggers, which is basically life.
Right. I'm sorry, but I'm tired. I'm sorry, but I'm hungry. The implication being I'm not really sorry, and because I have a justification or excuse for this behavior.
Yeah, I have a reason for it. And then included in that is, and you can help me with that, or you should help me more, like, is you should help me with this. So both of them did the same thing. It's just like, here's what we can do to make sure it doesn't happen again. It's not my responsibility. It's our responsibility.
So Act 1 has the language of an apology, I'm sorry, but then followed by an excuse or an explanation / justification that somehow implicates you. Act 1 of Apology Theater. And then Act 2 of Apology Theater. Now,
it's similar to Act 1, except that there's no longer I'm sorry. The initial sorry wasn't really an acknowledgement, but it was a faux attempt at it, right? Because they know that's what people do, right? It's disarming to say I'm sorry. So, I'll start with that, but there's no longer starting with that. It's just going to the excuse. So it's kind of acknowledging, oh yeah, ooh, boy, I guess I overreacted there. But again, I was tired and you didn't do what you said you were going to do to help me with that. So that's why this happened. So it's kind of increasing the language on why I'm responsible, but still kind of we're in this together though. Let's figure this out,
And sort of acknowledging that there was bad behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, still kind of acknowledging that, right?
But there's no I language in that. The behavior doesn't kind of originate from them.
No, it was very much we, like, so it's kind of like...
Or the situation, right?
Right, yeah, the situation or other people or something. Like.
And then Act 3 of Apology Theater with the narcissists.
It's full on just blind abusive behavior with no acknowledgement at all. So it's not even, there isn't even like I was tired or, whoa, there's no acknowledgement at all. It's just act terribly, basically, and then point out what I'm doing to cause, not in a way that, oh, you caused me to act this way. It's not acknowledging that they're acting that way. It's just acting that way and doubling down on whatever behavior it was that I was doing that caused them to abuse me.
So this sounds like this somewhat standard narcissist tactic that I'm not sure we've talked about before. You mentioned it in the book, and it goes by an acronym, DARVO, DARVO.
Right, so standing for deny, attack, and then reverse the victim and offender. So denying being so let's say Jay's yelling at me, and I say, stop yelling at me. And it says, I'm not yelling at you, so there's the denial. This is not yelling. You want to see yelling, I'll show you yelling. And then she shows me yelling.
Which is the attack.
That's the attack, right? So I'll show you yelling. Here's yelling, and then there may be other escalations included in that, slamming things, throwing things. And then the reverse victim. And this is what you're doing, so it becomes all about whatever it was that caused the anger. It's all about like, I'm a victim here. You weren't listening to me. You did something to instigate this response from me. So I'm completely justified in whatever it is I'm doing right in this very moment, no matter how extreme, how hurtful, how abusive it is.
So that's the kind of apologies you're going to get from narcissists.
Yes.
In your experience. And there was kind of that's Act 3, the
right.
Culminating act of the narcissist apology experience. The Narcissistic Apology Theater. And there was actually a kind of surprise ending to the theatrical experience, right?
Yeah, the surprise ending being, now I'm apologizing. Now we've come full circle to where it's still the same initial abusive behavior, but with this DARVO thrown in, they've now denied it, they've attacked me, and then they've reversed it. So now that I've done something to cause this, so they're now a victim, and I'm apologizing. Which is the whole point of it, right? And that's what I did time and time again, was whenever any sort of conflict happened, I'm apologizing. It didn't really matter what was causing it.
Including if it was their own bad behavior.
Yes.
You're apologizing for them, to them, for them. So now we're kind of into codependent apologizing, what that can look like. The primary one being in those relationships, apologizing when you didn't actually mean it.
Yeah, and I have plenty of evidence, not just memories, but I actually have text record evidence of consciously apologizing when I knew that I had zero responsibility. because I found, it's amazing. I love text records. You can just search for words, and I would search for sorry. And there's a nice little conversation with a friend about talking about Jay and an argument we had. And what would typically happen is it would never be resolved, because part of DARVO is lying, the denying. She needed to control the situation, so she needed to lie. And I knew it was a lie because it was about a conversation that we just had that day or the day before. It's like, wait, no, that's not what happened. Because of the DARVO, though, and because of my feeling like I have to resolve this atmosphere, because the conversation would end, and then the next tactic would come out, which would be like silent treatment. Either, it would involve maybe leaving the house and not responding to texts and making me wonder, what's my responsibility here now? What am I supposed to do? Or like in the house, but having this angry atmosphere, like slamming doors and drawers, and
her letting you know that you're still in trouble.
Yes, right. So, and this is going to be the way it's going to be until you fix this. And basically the way of fixing it, the only way of fixing it, I found, and then what I wound up doing, of course, was apology theater. The only way I can do is to pretend as though, yes, you were right. Yeah, I must have misunderstood. I must have forgot or misheard you or something. I'm sorry. Yes, you're correct.
So you're lying.
Yes.
And as we talked about in the episode, the lying episode, then you feel resentful and shame.
Right, because now, obviously I just betrayed myself. And then I fixed this relationship. Like, why am I fixing this? This person had just behaved terribly and lied to me, abused me, and I'm apologizing to them. That doesn't feel great.
So you successfully repaired the connection. You used the tool of apology to repair the connection, but this was not a connection with repairing. The connection was a trauma bond.
Yeah, and it would work, and that was really the only thing that worked. And then it got me back to safety, being this, okay, the abusive language has stopped. And I have another great example of this in a text record of one time when I was talking to someone about one of these silent treatments that went on for hours in the morning, and I was so anxious about it, and like, when are we going to have this conversation? How's this going to go? Oh my God, I was just, I could see my anxiety. And then there's a little gap, and then I come back on the text record and I say, yes, we had the conversation. She's no longer angry anymore. So all's right with the universe. I actually used that phrase, all's right with the universe, because that's all I needed, really, right? I just need this person to not be angry at me anymore. That's the main goal.
Which, that's just a trauma bond in a phrase. And we haven't talked about trauma bonds in a long time, but that's really what it is. Like, she was the universe.
Yeah.
And she was in control of the whole situation.
So I got very used to using apologies that way. That's really the only way I used them. It's like I came to see apologies as a tool of an inauthentic way of resolving someone's anger.
You brought that way of using apologizing into our relationship.
Yes. At first it was especially bad because I didn't have any of this knowledge about myself. So if you were angry, if we had any sort of conflict, that was my go-to. I had this overwhelming feeling that that's what I needed to do. And this was going to be the way to get out of this tense atmosphere.
But including if I was hurt or upset. So I don't think we want to say that you never felt sorry about your behavior. It was just more, the most motivating factor was to pacify me and soothe yourself.
Right. So it wasn't usually just straight up lying, like where I'm going to take responsibility for this, even though I know I shouldn't, because I could feel that you were upset, and I could feel that there was a reason. I may not have gotten to that reason yet, but I felt bad, and I knew that I was implicated and that I caused you to be upset.
So it wasn't the same as when you just straight up lied to the narcissist to say, yes, it's my fault, even though you completely didn't think it was your fault.
Right. That I knew they just lied to me. Right.
But it was still trying in some ways to kind of control my behavior, not understand it, but control it. And that's not really successful repair. So you're not actually repairing the connection, because what I wanted was an authentic connection, or at the very least, it was a very shoddy repair because they weren't holed up. And this is something I actually experienced in previous relationships as well, where I had a partner who would go to an apology very quickly if we were having any kind of conflict or if I was upset. And, sometimes I would not be ready to engage with an apology. Like, that's not what I was looking for. I wasn't looking for the other person to just capitulate to me. What I was looking for is to come to a shared understanding, to come again to a repair. And so if I didn't immediately, accept the apology and say, okay, well, fine, you apologize, everything's good, all's right with the universe, right?
Right.
And the conflict would continue, then he would start arguing the same point of view that he just apologized for, meaning it became clear to me that he was apologizing in order to pacify me or to self-soothe, that it wasn't authentic. Like, he didn't actually think that what he had done or his perspective on the experience was correct. He just wanted to end the argument. And if you end the argument before the repair is complete, then again, it's not going to hold up.
Well, and it makes it even worse because then the person's like, whoa, this person actually is just denying my feelings entirely and not even making an attempt.
It feels very manipulative because it feels like what it is. Like, they just want me to calm down. They don't actually want to understand me. They don't actually believe what they're saying. And so how do you then trust when you get an apology? Because it just feels inauthentic.
Yeah. And I remember you expressing that to me and then me thinking about that and then pausing and going like, okay, yeah, let me think about this here. Like what, and I remember at first not really getting it, but I remember that pull myself of what that felt like, that just kind of overwhelming urge to say I'm sorry because I just can't figure out anything else to say. I'm just not understanding the situation. I just feel bad somehow. And I'm not thinking about you. I'm thinking about myself. How do I make myself not feel bad? So it's not just I need to calm you down. It's also I need to excuse myself somehow, by throwing myself under the bus with an apology
And I think that, most of us have experience with people who over apologize, who say sorry a lot. And it does feel like it's coming from their own anxiety, because I've been apologized to by some of these people when I don't even know what they're apologizing for. Like,
right.
I didn't feel any kind of injury. I didn't sense any kind of disconnection. I didn't think they did anything that needed to be apologized for in my mind. So that has almost the reverse effect because it makes you feel kind of disconnected from this person. It's like, we're clearly not sharing the same reality here because you're apologizing and I have no idea why.
Yeah. Like, did I give off some kind of vibe that was making you feel attacked or something? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah. Well, what's the motivation for an apology? So again, it feels something's going on with them. Yeah. Whether it's self-soothing or their own anxiety, and they're using this tool of apology to try to fix that. Mm-hmm. But what it can do is actually somewhat damage the relationship, the connection that supposedly it's supposed to repair.
Right. I mean, yeah, we've talked about this in the early, season 1, where that is one very common codependent tactic that a lot of people use. I haven't used it as much. I mean, I've definitely used inauthentic apologies, but it hasn't been one of my knee-jerk ones that a lot of people, where you just hear it constantly.
As a form of people-pleasing. And one of the big problems with people-pleasing is you're going to please the wrong people. So the narcissists, they took your apologies, even though they were inauthentic, because that's what they want. They wanted capitulation. They didn't care about actually connection.
Yeah, let them off the hook.
But people who care about connection and not capitulation, they're not going to want to be apologized to just reflexively. Because if you think of this kind of physical metaphor that we're using this tool of apology to repair a connection, like a physical connection, something's been broken apart. And what it often is the feelings of connection arise from the sense that we have this shared reality. And when that gets ruptured, when we have different experiences, we have to find a way to reconcile those experiences. And so true apologies need to be motivated by empathy, because there needs to be an understanding of the other person and a feeling with that other person.
Right, which is exactly why I struggled so much with apologies and having most of my apologies be motivated by this old inauthentic pull, because for the longest time, I never really was able to tap into my empathy.
So to refer back to the episode on empathy in this season as a tool, we discussed that there were 3 components to empathy. There's a cognitive element, there was an emotional element, and there was a behavioral element. And that's the same thing with apologies. Apologies are an exercise in empathetic repair. It's kind of using your empathy for a specific purpose, and this is to repair this connection that's been severed, presumably by your own behavior. So there has to be a cognitive understanding of what happened, what the other person's experience of your behavior was. There has to be an emotional response to that. Like, you have to feel hurt for the person, recognizing that if you were in a similar situation, you would also be hurt in that way. Or even if you weren't, you have the emotional imagination to feel their pain and want to relieve them of that pain. And then you have to have this behavioral or motivational component that will allow you to say, well, I'm not going to do that behavior anymore because I don't want them to feel that pain. Or I'm going to change the situation because I don't want them to feel that pain. And I understand the situation enough to know how to do that. So, it's not terribly straightforward, which is why if you rush to an apology, like if you immediately go to this, like, oh, I'm feeling bad because they're in pain and I don't want them to be in pain, I'm going to apologize. Well, that's going to be a shoddy repair, because you're just completely eliminating the cognitive component where you actually take the time to understand what happened and to come to an agreement with your partner as to what happened here. Mm-hmm. How did this rupture happen? What were involved in that? What does the suffering feel like? And how can we make sure it doesn't happen again? And if you do that, actually, you might wind up discovering between the two of you that there are no apologies necessary.
Yes, right. It's a really good exercise to remind myself, because these steps of empathy don't have to be, they can become second nature. They need to be practiced, but my knee-jerk impulse to calm you down by taking responsibility is the exact opposite of empathy. Yeah, even if I eventually get there, I still have that impulse. I have to remind myself every time I have this impulse, like, oh my God, and we may not finish a conversation, because it takes some processing to get to that understanding.
It does, and again, early on, as you're saying, you really struggle with that. You would often go to this second part. You felt bad that I felt bad, and then you'd apologize, but it'd be a version of, I'm sorry, I'm a terrible person, which you believed. It wasn't narcissistically like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just terrible, right? Like, you would go into a shame spiral.
Yes, shame spiral, right. Yeah.
And then I would end up comforting you. And these would be situations where literally, like, I would not be looking for an apology. I did not want you to feel bad about yourself. Mm-hmm. I was just getting hurt, and I didn't want to get hurt anymore. So I wanted to have a discussion about what happened, and it may have been you said something or you did something. I got hurt. How can we not make that happen again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I remember some of my earlier faux attempts too, being like, oh, I won't do it again. But then it'd be like, what? What's it? I'm feeling this overwhelming shame, and I'm just trying to get out of the shame still. And it's just like, well, I won't do that. I won't do that again. I promise.
Yes, sometimes you would seem to have those components in place. Mm-hmm. I know that it's me and my poor communication skills, and I won't get better. But then we have evidence that the behavioral change was still such a problem for you, mm-hmm. because you were stuck in this feeling of powerlessness.
Yes, the action piece became really difficult. And I think a lot of times I could sense in the moment that I was not going to take the action.
And then you would go very quickly to resentment.
Yes, because you're forcing me to take this action that I can't take. And now I'm feeling shame, and you caused me to feel that shame by forcing me to take this action that I can't take.
Or by calling you out on behavior that you knew wasn't great behavior, mm-hmm. but that you didn't know how to change.
Yeah, right. And I remember the olden days of just like, I don't know where to start. I don't how to, and it's just like, I'm just constantly bringing it back to me. Like, I'm just forgetting you in these conversations most of the time. So this is the empathy disconnect. It's just, Oh, I'm feeling shame again. Let's focus on that. Help me out of this. Okay. And then we end the conversation and like, what, how did this all start? I don't know.
We've talked about apologies as a tool for maintaining the connection, which is one category of work. But it strikes me as also a tool for strengthening the partnership, which is the other category of work.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's really kind of what comes after the apology, right? I mean, a demonstration of the understanding. And that's why apology itself isn't a power tool. It's a way, okay, you can acknowledge that you understand. You acknowledge that you feel with the person for it. I understand. I'm feeling motivated. I'm saying I'm going to work on this behavior, whatever it is, but then you actually have to do it. And then that's what's going to strengthen the partnership.
Because the idea is like neither of us want to hurt each other or to cause distress or suffering. So we want to be partners in making sure that doesn't happen, that our own behaviors don't do that. But, it's hard. You live with someone, they annoy you sometimes. I mean, sure, sometimes we're tired and hungry. That doesn't mean we have to be abusive, but sometimes we say and do things that we realize on retrospect, especially if the other person can point it out in a respectful way, that we were not living up to our own values or the values of the relationship. And apology can be a good way to recognize that, to verbalize that, as long as it has those three components, that you actually understand the ways in which your behaviors were damaging or less than what you would want them to be, and that you feel for the other person and that they're suffering in distress, and that you are committed to trying to do better.
You said it's also part of the process of empathy and part of the process of using empathy to apologize or think about apologizing is sometimes you may decide that there isn't an apology necessary because the other person's hurt, but you may not have caused that hurt. So, but that's something that you'll discover through this process rather than just going straight to an apology. Like, oh, this person feels bad. It must be me.
Right. I mean, it might be the other person mistook something you said or did, or was having a triggered reaction to something in the past, which is not your responsibility to apologize for their past. But you can be a partner in, again, helping them move past the stress. It doesn't necessarily need to involve an apology.
So I'm thinking, I mean, of course, I'm just thinking it from the reverse of us in one of these conversations, say, where I go down a shame spiral. You don't need to apologize to me, which you haven't really. You have sometimes if you said something kind of borderline or something, but there's no reason to apologize to someone just because they feel bad. So yeah, if I'm feeling shame, it's my responsibility that I'm feeling that shame.
And it doesn't really do you any good if I were apologizing for things that I didn't do, because I can't change the behavior or the situation, right? Like it might make you feel better in the moment because it's not me, it's her, right?
Right.
But ultimately it doesn't, it's a shoddy repair because it doesn't hold up over time because I didn't actually do anything. So I'm not giving you any material to work with in order for you to not suffer in the future.
Right. And if anything, the fact that I used my shame sometimes to divert the attention back to myself was slightly narcissistic. So if you were to apologize to me for it, I may wind up using it again, just unconsciously maybe, but just like, oh yeah, last time when I went down this shame spiral, she apologized and it ended the conversation. It made me feel better. I'll do that again.
Right.
That's a way to get out of this.
So avoid apology theater. That's our big takeaway. And a way to do that is to kind of think about those three components of empathy: the cognitive, the emotional, the behavioral. And before you rush to an apology, decide whether you have all those components in place, or do you need to talk through it with your partner? And
then we wind up with a real connection as opposed to some kind of scotch taped end of conversation repair.
A lasting repair for sure.
So this is what we'd consider a tool of communication. And we're going to be going through a handful of, because communication itself isn't a tool, but there are tools of communication, and this is one of them.
It's such a broad category. We decided we need to kind of break it up into the many communicative acts, apologizing being the first one of it.
We hope you join us in a couple of weeks for another
relationship tool.